Welcome to the first video in this series on bringing words to life, videos that explore vocabulary instruction in depth. I wanted to start with an introduction with how I became obsessed with this idea of learning new words. My first teaching experience was inside a middle school science classroom, but the pace was so fast that I didn't always see these words becoming embedded into student conversations or having them carry those words outside of the classroom. Eventually, I swapped roles, teaching both ELA and math, and I noticed that this problem followed me across those subjects as well. I asked students in class to accomplish tasks based on the skills we practiced, and I learned that sometimes the language I used with these tasks was a barrier to students even getting started. In ELA, I asked them to identify the theme of passages and support their answer with evidence from the text. But I realized by their responses that something in my directions wasn't making sense. Then it hit me. The words were the barrier: identify, support, evidence. I was putting roadblocks in front of a good deal of my students, which prevented them from unlocking their success with both classroom talk and writing about their thinking. So, as an instructional coach, I went pretty deep into this topic. Last summer and the summer before, I've been dabbling in these big ideas that I may not always have time for during the school year. And that involved reading and listening and practicing everything or anything that I could find about this idea of vocabulary acquisition and how we can get students and ourselves learning and using and practicing and even testing out new words. So, this first session, I want to talk a little bit about the why behind vocabulary instruction. And I want to tell you a story about my son, Pippin, that he told me the other day because it really clicked. So, at the end of the day, Pippin gets off the bus, and the only part of his day that he wants to share is about his recess experience. So, he's in fifth grade, and he told me that him and his best friend, Amin, spent their entire recess doing experiments, which got me intrigued. Pippin mentioned that they tapped their fingertips against the hot blacktop, and he theorized that tiny little messages were zapping to their brains and back from their fingertips, telling them that the ground was hot. And I told him, nerves, I said. This is what you're talking about. You're talking about nerves. Only Pippin and Amin didn't have the language to explain what nerves were. They tried with whatever language they did have, but it was the word for this concept that was being the barrier to their conversations. And this is very typical for students developing as learners and as readers. Usually, the collection of words that students can identify or understand grows really quickly. Second graders experience an explosion of these mapped words, learning a new word about every 90 minutes. Looking at fifth graders and beyond, these students encounter tens of thousands of unfamiliar words each year. But the cool thing about the English language is that when you learn any given word, it unlocks entire word families. So coaching into that skill allows students to better hone their ability to decode unfamiliar words across all settings. So, in the end of this first session, I want to ask you a couple of questions. First, what is your role inside school settings? Second, what are some of your favorite words to use and say? And this can be in your everyday life. These can be some words that you're known for, maybe not commonly used four-letter words, but what are some of the words that you just have fun saying? They can be words about your interests or sports or hobbies. They can be words you find yourself using all the time, but what are some of these favorite words? And the third thing that I want you to answer is, what do you think are some of the most important words in the subject area that you teach? We're going to be using this information as we explore this topic of vocabulary acquisition throughout this series.